My subject today is entitled The Hijacking or the Hijack of Carnival. A name that should jump out at all of us today is the name Kelso Cochrane. Kelso Cochrane was murdered on the May the 17th, 1959. And he was murdered in Notting Hill. And he was murdered by a Caucasian white man who was 20 years old at the time. And you know, brothers and sisters, where we get into trouble a lot of the time as black people in the contemporary today is that we don't know history. We don't follow history and we don't study history, so therefore history can be constantly repeating itself on us, and we act like we are surprised when things happen because we don't realize that this is cyclical. This has happened before. Because at the time of this brother's murder, Kelso Cochrane, he was a carpenter at the age of 32 years old, just minding his own business, coming home one night when he was attacked by a group of white people who stabbed him in the heart with what was in those days called a stiletto knife, very pointy dagger type blade, and they stabbed him in the heart, and ultimately this brother lost his life. Now, what became very apparent straight away was that the murderer was known very quickly. He was actually arrested on the night with another individual. The police had him, but in the end, I think he died in 2007, having been arrested, questioned, but never charged. This is the reality. Ring some bells? Remember 1993? A certain Stephen Lawrence? You see, nothing changes. This is the reality. Now, the climate in which our brother was stabbed to death was a climate where the year before that, in 1958, the way the media, the white, lying, fake news media reported it in 1958 was that there were race riots taking place in Notting Hill. Race riots. The reality of those so-called race riots were white groups of thugs, racist thugs, going out on a daily basis, nightly basis, attacking black people. And the black people who lived in those areas at the time, in places like Notting Hill, which in those days was a very densely concentrated area of black people, mostly living in tenement houses and under slum landlords, living multiple persons to a room. And those white people in the area who were part of white nationalist groups were very angry at the fact that you had these so-called immigrants, these so-called blackies and darkies and niggers and coons and sambos all coming into the UK. Those are the terms that were used in those days to describe us. In those days they still had the notices up, the signs, no Irish, no blacks, no dogs, because people didn't want to rent rooms to black people, especially if they felt that their establishment was, a nice establishment, whatever. So we were pushed to the margins and forced to rent really substantial, substandard places. Many people don't know that in that first generation, that first wave of black people who are so-called Windrush people who came after 1948 and that time, many of those black people were forced to live in an air raid shelter, a former bomb bunker in Clapham Common. Literally like they were refugees. These were the circumstances of our entry into the UK, even though we had fought, bled, and died in the First World War, Crimea War, Second World War, on behalf of these people, freeing them from so-called Nazism and Hitler's designs. This was the climate in which Kelso Cochrane was murdered. It was a climate of race attacks that was taking place, and black people were very much on the defensive. A lot of the black men of that day, they literally had to form themselves into groups and to protect themselves, and they would fight back against the attackers. And this is what the media called race riots. But it was really white people, white racists attacking black people, and black people attempting to defend themselves. But being the cowards that they are, they realized that they could no longer have group attacks against us when we were in a group. So they would start picking us off one at a time when we were walking by ourselves at night in the street. And this is how our brother met his death, similar to Stephen Lawrence. And of course, a new book has come out, written by this individual. I'll quote some from it in a minute, but he has named the alleged murderer as a Patrick Digby, who at the time was 20 years old, and he was a merchant seaman and working in the I think in the culinary aspect of the ships that he sailed on. And as I said, it was an open secret. In that time, they knew who this killer was, and apparently this killer went around actually boasting that he had done it. In those days, for murder, you could still be hung. And one of the rumors, and which is also mentioned in the book, was that the police were worried that if they arrested and charged a white man with murder, they wouldn't like to see the backlash of a white man being hung for the murder of a black man, because the backlash from white society would have been too severe. Saying that the white society was so racist that a white man being punished for that. Because again, I'm saying this, beloved, I'm saying this because some of us, and we got to be careful, because I hear some idiot sometimes when we were in Hyde Park teaching, and I see some people posting things like, oh, you know, why are you lot talking about slavery and whatever? You lot were never enslaved. Thinking that slavery was isolated to North America or the Caribbean, but those of us in the UK, we got nothing to do with it. We're some isolated group who are just jumping on the bandwagon of sufferation, but you've never suffered nothing. But I want you to understand, beloved, that, you know, we have suffered in this country as much as any other group has suffered in this country, and far more than any other group. But if we're not careful, because we're not studying the history, then we won't necessarily know. We won't pass on the information to our children. Because that's one of the major problems today, that the black youth know nothing about the history of us growing up in this country. I came here in 1967. And when I came here, I heard rumors. My dad didn't tell me nothing, which was a failure on his part. But I heard rumors from an uncle that my father was chased by teddy boys. I was so naive, I thought literally when they said teddy boys, I thought about teddy bears. I didn't know what they were talking about at the age of 9 or 10 years old when I came here. But I heard other talk about these teddy boys wrapping coins between their fingers and wrapping handkerchiefs around their hands, and this is how they would go out and punch black people in the face. In my own time, growing up in the early 70s in this country, I've known untold incidents with white people on the streets where my generation, we had to fight white racists on the streets. We had to fight physical fights and battles with the police. That's how I came up. So nobody can tell me that we haven't experienced racism right here. The police in the 70s pulled up an old obscure vagrancy law, and they used that vagrancy law that was designed from the 17th century to stop homeless people or beggars or people who were wandering the street from being able to do that lawfully. They had a vagrancy law. That's the law that they pulled up and revived in the 70s and called it sus. And then we as young blacks were being picked up as suspicious persons. And we were being charged with, let me tell you one of the charges I was charged with. I was charged with suspicion of having offensive weapons to cause injury to persons or persons unknown. attempted theft from persons or persons unknown. So they didn't have to produce no victim, no evidence whatsoever. Just a policeman saying they suspected that we were doing something. We say, no, we wasn't. You're going to prison. You're going to Borstal. Or you got a conviction against you. And what they were doing in the 70s and the 80s were mass convictions of black people. No matter how trivial the so-called conviction was, but what that translated into was that later you couldn't apply for a mortgage. You couldn't apply to get a bank loan. You couldn't apply for certain jobs because you got this stigma against you as a criminal. And this was systematic institutional racism designed to criminalize a whole people. All praise is due to Allah. This is the reality of our history in the so-called United Kingdom, beloved brothers and sisters. It's important to understand that the police knew and had been given information about the suspected killers of Stephen Lawrence within a few hours of that crime happening. But it took over 20 years and various aborted attempts that were sabotaged by the police themselves. Because corruption was in the police in 1993 and corruption was in the police in 1959. Nothing has changed, beloved. And in 2019, the corruption is still rife. And the racism, which is the key aspect, and understand what I'm saying when I'm talking about racism, because again, the devil is working overtime to try to give an impression that racism is every human being on the planet must take ownership of racism. We are all racist. Shut up, you devil, you damn liar. The racism that I'm talking about, and the racism which has been from day one and continues unabated, just morphing and metamorphing into different guises and disguises, is anti-black racism. Let's be clear. Let's be clear. Jewish people have suffered coming to this country. Irish people have suffered coming to this country, and untold other so-called small groups have suffered. But let me tell you something. Nobody has experienced the systematic, programmatic, centuries-long oppression that black people have suffered at the hands of Caucasian people. Be they upper-class Caucasians, middle-class Caucasians, or so-called lower-class Caucasians. This has been the reality of our experience, beloved family. The media plays a big game with us, and we have to understand the role that they play. Because, for instance, now you'll hear about the carnival, and of course one of the first things you hear is about the number of arrests and the violence that takes place at carnival. And that's a media concoction. You must understand, beloved family. You know, we in 1998, just after the Stephen Lawrence inquiry in Elephant and Castle at Hannibal House, we held the 10,000 man march. And according to how we were told that you count the numbers in Trafalgar Square, we estimate that throughout that day we may have attracted in excess of 30,000 people. It was a very, very successful march. When we initially approached the police about conducting the march, they raised all manner of objections to why we can't do it and why we shouldn't do it, and the potential of some kind of anarchy on the streets calling on 10,000 black men. We stood our ground and we insisted that we were going to commemorate the anniversary of the Million Man March on that day. It took place on the 17th of October 1998, because I can't remember the exact reasons why, but there was a technical reason why we couldn't have it on October the 16th, and so it moved to October the 17th. But nonetheless, we went ahead, and if my memory serves me right, beloved, let me tell you something. On the day of that march, and by the way, the media at that time lied through their teeth, barefaced lies they were telling in the run-up to that march, talking about all kinds of potential disastrous things that might happen on the day, and so on and so forth. And all of the naysayers came out, and we had people in those days like so-called Professor Sewage, or Sewell. He's still around, one of these black imps, one of these apologists for white supremacy, who wears a disguise of blackness. I want you to hear me, because I'm not playing with these people, because we're going to call out all of these people who work systematically to undermine the growth and development of the black community in the United Kingdom. But this individual was actively writing columns and saying all manner of things against the march. Oh, why do we have to atone? We don't have to atone. Like coming on some little tricky argument like, oh, why do black men have to atone? You know, we do have to atone. We have to atone to our women. We have to atone to our children. We have to atone to our God. We have to atone to ourselves. We have to make amends. But he was trying to boost up the rebel in the black man to say, yeah, why do we have to atone? You got to understand how the devil works, playing on our ego to try to keep us away from something that potentially is good for us as a people who want to change the condition of our lives and to move forward. He said, no, we don't need no 10,000 man march. And then on the day itself, you know, one of our sisters, Sister Joy Gardner,
That's right.
she was murdered
That's right.
by immigration officials and police in her home in front of her 6-year-old son.
That's right.
One of the injuries that she suffered in that assault was a broken back. And in the media, in the lying fake news media, the headline was the most violent woman we've ever come across. This is how they depicted our sister after they murdered her, because they were trying to force her out of her home, to deport her, like this scandal now that's broken about Windrush, because she was one of those people who they were trying to deport unlawfully, and they murdered her in the process. And her mother, who's a good Christian woman, and her name is Myrna, Sister Myrna Simpson, a good Christian woman, all of her life being loyal and faithful to the United Kingdom, possibly a lover of the Queen and the royal family, and all that goes into our parents' generation, who would be happy to serve Queen and country, and to suffer and to go without and to have less just to go along to get along. Myrna Simpson, having come face to face with the white, institutionally racist establishment after the murder of her daughter, and having to now deal with police, deal with immigration, deal with the government, deal with the media, she began to question everything she had ever believed about this country. And she said that she realized that she was dealing with demons. It's very sad that most of our people, it takes a personal tragedy for us to finally wake up to the reality of the system in which we live. On the morning of the 10,000 man march, we had invited Sister Myrna Simpson to be in attendance and to come and say a few words to the gathered people on that march. And the sister said that she was in her home and she put the TV on in the morning, and on the TV the news said the march had been cancelled. And she said her heart just sank, and she felt so bad because, you know, she was really looking forward to just go in and saying, because her concern was really about highlighting the plight of her family since the murder of her daughter, the unlawful killing of Joy Gardner. And so she said, you know, she was in a bit of despair. She didn't know quite what to do, but she said, you know what, I'll just go for a walk down there anyway. And the sister said when she turned the corner and came into Trafalgar Square and saw that magnificent crowd of black people, she said, oh my God, I will never believe anything I hear from that lying media again. Praise be to Allah. Praise be to Allah. Praise be to Allah. On the day, they closed the nearby tube stations. I mean, they went to work, beloved. Lots of people who were supposed to be coming didn't get there, but still it was a success. But that's the level that these people were trying to influence our demonstration, our march, and trying to curtail it or stop it altogether. The police had brought up all of these straw man arguments about potential problems, and we knocked all of their straw man arguments down. And we insisted that we had the capacity within the Nation of Islam to bring our march on and to make it a success. And from my recollection, throughout that day, we may have seen 3 policemen. There was no police in sight. And on that day, reflecting the Million Man March, there was not one incident of trouble. There was no arrest. There was no litter. There was no carnage. It was a peaceful, beautiful event. The police came to me at the start of the march. I was acting in the capacity on that day as the head of security. And the police liaison officer came to me on Windrush Square and called me and said, I am taping what I'm about to say to you. You are now on camera, and I'm informing you that as far as the Metropolitan Police is concerned, we are taking no responsibility whatsoever for this march. From this moment on, the responsibility for this march is now on you. Anything that happens is on you. Any liability, any incidents is on you.
Yes, sir. I'll be a witness, bro.
Praise be to Allah. I said, yes, sir. Because I don't know what he expected me to say, whether I'm supposed to say, well, no, please, Mr. Policeman, police us. See, beloved, we must, as a people, take charge of our own affairs. All praise is due to Allah. All praise is due to Allah. Because they're operating on the basis that we're supposed to be so cowardly and so afraid of our own shadow that we can't do anything without our former slave master and his children continuing to be a governing body over and above us, beloved. This really has to end. If we are ever to justifiably claim that we're a free people, beloved. Praise be to Allah. The incident in 1959 is very important. Let me just read to you some excerpts from the book written by Mark Alden, who is a BBC documentary maker who spent 4 years interviewing witnesses for the book. And the book is entitled Murder in Notting Hill. And the book claims that Digby, this individual I told you about before, this 20-year-old, Digby confessed to the murder, but boasted to friends, "They'll never get me." This is the arrogance of privileged white people. And when I say privileged white people, again, some of us, we think privileged white people just means Donald Trump and rich white people. No, all white people are privileged when you understand how they have benefited from the destruction of the African continent, the carving up of the African continent at that so-called Berlin conference, and how they have continued to exploit black people, African people, for hundreds of years, and have benefited over those hundreds of years, built and grown all of their institutions and their wealth on the backs of black people, and we have been suffering detrimentally as a result of this all of these many years. In the book it says it was very clear the police knew who did it. This ain't a black man writing this, I don't think. I think this is a Caucasian man. It was very clear the police knew who did it, said Mr. Alden. Digby was arrested straight away, but I definitely believe the authorities preferred to let it lie because they were afraid of further disturbances. Those further disturbances, what the book is talking about, was the disturbances we mentioned earlier that were happening all throughout 1958, that which the media called riots, race riots, that which was white thugs attacking black people. Oswald Mosley's British Union movement and the White Defence League, headed by Colin Jordan, both had strong presence in the area of Notting Hill in those days. And white youth would gather to go in what they called nigger hunting. They've put an N and some asterisks, but I'm going to say the word nigger hunting. This is where they would go. They would go nigger hunting at night in Notting Hill. That was what was happening in the 50s in this country, in Notting Hill. We're dealing today with the hijacking of Carnival. And by the way, let me say this, because I've said it before, I say it again. This politically correct media is not going to stop us from teaching our children the history of what you called us. You called us niggers. We never coined that phrase. Some of our misguided, foolish, so-called rap artists and grime artists and others, and some of our youth who don't know history, use it as some term of endearment or think that it's some kind of cool thing to call one another, but we know the history of it. And it's an evil term, but we're not going to let you whitewash the history and pretend you never called it to us, because it still has its legacy today. So we reserve the right to recount our history using the terms that you used, not the N word, because N could mean nutmeg, N could mean narcissistic, N could mean all manner of things, but we're not going to obscure the reality of what you called us. Nigger, nignog, Cochrane, this is our brother, Kelso Cochrane, who was an Antiguan. Any Antigans in the house?
Yes, sir.
Antiguan?
Yes, sir.
Well, there you go, brother. This was your countryman, brother. He was an Antiguan immigrant. He was walking home from hospital where he had been treated for an injury he sustained at work when he was attacked in South Ham Street, a short distance from his home. A commemorative blue plaque now marks the spot where he died. And by the way, they put a blue plaque where our brother was murdered. But I'm saying, as we go forward, with all of this knife and gun crime that's currently taking place on the streets, one of the things that we want to insist that the authorities start doing is that everywhere one of our children is murdered, that we either put a blue plaque, or we put a commemorative statue, or we grow a tree with a plaque on that tree to mark the spot of these murders. Because, see, beloved, we got to understand the amount of our young people who are dying and are being forgotten. Within a few months, you don't even realize that you're walking over a spot where a young child lost their life for no other reason than the fact that they have been marginalized on the institutionally racist world, which has caused these young people to believe that they are nothing. Caused our young people to be running up and down with their trousers down, thinking that it's a fashion statement. The amount of young boys you see now with their trousers down with like a tracksuit, or even sometimes their pants underneath it. And then they got one hand in their crutch holding on to their private parts. And you see, it'd be one thing if you saw two young boys doing that over a period of 6 months. But when you see 6 or 7 of them in your travels in one day, and everybody's got the same stance, everybody's bent, everybody's got the same stupid clothes on, everybody looks stupid like a baby with a nappy full of poo, then you realize that this is a systematic brain destruction of our youth, where our youth have been led to believe that this stupid, idiotic look is somehow style and fashion. That's some heavy duty conditioning, beloved. It wouldn't be so bad if it was brainwashing, for God's sake. At least it would mean the brain had been washed clean. But this is brain death. And then if you tell them, pull your pants up, brother, pull your trousers up, brother, they're looking at you like, man, you're crazy, man. You don't get it, man. They messed up our children. But then who's to blame? Where are we? Where are the parents, man? How did we become so afraid of our own children? My God. You know, we have a reputation in the Caribbean, you know, as people who take charge of their children. That reputation is gone. Gone. And we are now looked at as chumps in the black community. White man is laughing his head off because he designed this. And we fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. He wanted to take our youth. And we have given him our youth. And I have no sympathy. I want you to hear me well. When I hear some of us crying, oh, you know, what's going on with the children? Well, you need to take a look at yourself. Because the fruit never falls far from the tree. And I'm telling you, beloved, some of us as parents, we are so busy raving, so busy dancing. You know this. You know when Christmas comes, and you hear these liars. They're telling you, oh, you know, I'm not into Christmas. It's for the children. That's a damn lie. That's a lie. When was your child born? Came out of the womb saying, Mom, when's Christmas? No, you taught them about Christmas. And it's really for you. Because Christmas is the time when we can get that eggnog down. Christmas is the time when we can get that strong drink down, and we can use the excuse. I think when Brother Alvin was at the front, he was talking about the day off. See, because that in our enslavement, we look forward to a day off. And Christmas was one of the few times that the devil gave us a day off. And not only did he give us a day off, he encouraged us on that day to get paralytically drunk. He encouraged it. So now we're carrying on the tradition of getting ourselves completely and utterly drunk, legless, out of our heads on strong drink and other intoxicants and bad food. A big ham. But you're a so-called Christian. You're a damn liar. Because your Christian book tells you not to eat that abominable flesh. But then here the liars now. Oh, in the New Testament, he says all you got to do is bless it. See, abracadabra. So here's a divinely prohibited food full of poison, full of strychnine worm, microscopic worms that eat their way into the person's brain and into the intestinal wall and begins a destructive process of degeneration of their own flesh. But all you got to say is, blessings. What a damn fool. The enemy has done a magnificent job. Magnificent job. The book continues. Suspicion quickly fell on young white men who had been at a house party in the same street, and Digby was quickly arrested together with another man, both of whom claimed they had left the party to have a fight with each other. In a white man. Oh, because they must have, probably our brother defended himself. Our Antiguan brother fought back, and he probably injured the little devils who tried to kill him and who eventually killed him, so they may have had marks on them. So they're saying, oh, we left the two white men, we left the party to have a fight with each other. But only white people could say that and get away with it. Digby was later released, but one of his closest friends at the time, named in the book as Frank, told the author that days after he was freed, he told me he had done it and they'd never get him. I've done it and they'll never get me. The same witness said that he had been told that Digby had hidden the knife under the floorboards at his mother's house and it's still there. You know, when these police go looking for the murder weapon and they leave no stone unturned. You understand? But the rumor was going around at the time that the man had put the knife under the floorboards at his mother's house, but nobody bothered. Digby's stepdaughter, Susie. By the way, let me just quickly digress a little bit, because I've got to say to you again, you know, are you familiar with the movie? American Psycho? Are you familiar with that movie? Yes. Do you understand what happened in that movie? Where you got a white man who is a serial killer, and the man is trying to confess. And the authorities don't want to know. So he says, well, I might as well just carry on then. You got to understand that this is what happens in the white world. They can try to even confess. See, with black people, we can be innocent and get convicted of the crime. With the white man, he can be as guilty as the day he was born, and he will escape prosecution. Even when Jeffrey Epstein was convicted and received, I think, 18 months for a crime which would normally carry a life sentence. Think about this, beloved. This is child rape and sex trafficking, which is so serious that it carries heavyweight sentences. But here you got Jeffrey Epstein, who does a deal and gets 18 months. Then not only that, beloved, you think, okay, 18 months, you go to jail and you take your chances in there with the burglars and the car thieves and the stick-up men and the stabbers and the whatever. No, beloved, he gets a private wing of the prison. He's allowed to leave the prison 16 hours a day and only sleep in the prison at night. Come on, beloved. Do you understand the kind of world that we live in? And what white privilege and let's go further. Not just white privilege, so-called Jewish privilege. Because Epstein and what's the other one's name? The one in Hollywood? Weinstein. See, these are the so-called Jews. Understand this. I'm not talking about real Jews here. But so-called Jews who appear to have such inordinate power and influence and money that they can basically do whatever they want and walk away and get away, and the media hardly says a damn thing. Ghislaine Maxwell, who was supposed to be one of the main procurers for Epstein. This is the daughter of Robert Maxwell, the so-called media tycoon who mysteriously rolled off his boat in the middle of the ocean and disappeared whilst he was being investigated for embezzlement and massive theft of pension funds. And everyone knows that he was Mossad, Israeli intelligence, and Epstein is reputed to be Mossad, Israeli intelligence, and the daughter, possibly the same thing. Come on, beloved. I said it before and I'll say it again. Chances are Epstein is not even dead. But as we speak, he's sipping on a pina colada on another island somewhere. On another, maybe in Antigua. Laughing his damn head off with a nice little beard. And a Cuban cigar. So the book goes on. Digby's stepdaughter, Susie Reed, described him as an over-the-top racist. This is the man's stepdaughter, the alleged murderer. As an over-the-top racist, and told the author she accused him of murdering Cochrane, to which he replied, yeah, so what if I did? You can't prove nothing. This is how the killers of black people can basically run around and boast about what they've done and nothing happens. Cochrane's murder was greeted with outrage among the black community, some of whom marched down Whitehall holding protest banners. This is in 1959. This is very, very important. Rab Butler, the then Home Secretary, made an appeal in Parliament for witnesses to come forward and set up a public inquiry into race relations. Despite apparent fears that the murder would stoke further tension, it is now seen as a turning point in race relations in the area and a catalyst for the Notting Hill Carnival. This is how Carnival came about. Carnival comes about in Notting Hill as a direct result of black people taking to the streets to demand justice. What has Carnival become? From the time Claudia Butler, her name was, one of the main people who headed up the process of trying to establish this carnival, this demonstration. From the time she began to organize and get black people to commemorate every year and to go onto the streets in Notting Hill, the authorities have been trying to shut it down. But unfortunately for them, it just kept on growing and growing and growing. The opposition to Carnival reached its zenith in 1976, when every day in 1976, starting from around May, June, every day in 1976 was like today in terms of the heat. And it was the summer of 76 was a famous summer. Your little brother at the time was incarcerated in Borstal. I was in Borstal. And the police were so like an occupation force in the carnival that they were putting so much pressure on the black people who were coming out to the carnival, and they were policing it so heavily and arresting people for nothing and really like being bully boys, that in 1976 the black people could take no more, and they fought back at Carnival. And Carnival turned into a big mass fight in 1976, where the police had to pick up dustbin lids from people's front gardens to try to defend themselves, because black people had enough. They felt like they just couldn't move in their demonstration because these police were just on them and just trying to do what they've always been doing in the 70s and the 80s, which is to criminalize black youth and the black community. And so that was the famous uprising of 1976. I was in Borstal and I saw a flash of it on the television, and we went mad in the Borstal. There was a riot in the Borstal. We lost it in the Borstal, beloved. We wanted to break out and get to London because we knew about that oppression, and we were cheering our brothers and sisters who said enough is enough. And you saw police trying to reverse out in their cars, and the cars are getting mashed up. And you should all go back and do your research on 1976. Since 1976, they began to introduce new police vehicles. Now with the mesh and the defense cages on the vehicle, this all came about as a result of 1976. All of their riot shields changed as a result of 1976. And you see, it's important to also understand that we are the people that traditionally the authorities experiment on. So any new equipment, anything that they want to try on the populace, they try it on black people first. So this is where all of this stuff stems from, all of it comes from. This is the origin of it. Some of you should remember that on The Real McCoy, over 25 years ago, we did a sketch on The Real McCoy, and it's on YouTube, so we need to find it for our brother. But we did a sketch on YouTube where we depicted the carnival. And how was the carnival depicted? It was two black people, myself and the sister, I think it was Sister Luella Gideon who played next to me in that particular sketch. And we were both dancing together to carnival music. And we were surrounded by police. And the police had a loud hailer saying, keep dancing, keep moving, because that's what carnival had become then. And we were predicting what carnival would become, where black people would just be, we're just like a token on the street, surrounded by police and dancing like a bunch of fools. You know, our people say, the question that we ask in our cultural questioning of our reality is, how can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? And it's really important, beloved, that you understand that right now in 2019, a lot of white people are going to be at the carnival today and tomorrow, beloved, and I'm telling you, beloved, it's like they're coming to watch a group of black people on a reservation. It's like we're like a little token surviving group of a once mighty people who now are going to put on a little show for them. We're going to parade ourselves half naked, and we're going to dance and push our backsides into a policeman's lap. My God. You know, when I see these things, it's so painful, beloved, because I know that we don't understand what we're doing, and that these demonic people that we think we're having fun with and what they think of us. But we're going to witness today our people drinking alcohol out of a policeman's helmet. Just that alone. Just think how filthy that is, beloved. Man with his dirty dandruff head, and you're going to now try and drink his sweaty, nasty head. But because you're so intoxicated, because you've been so destroyed, and this white policeman or black policeman, as the case may be, or Asian policeman, as the case may be, it makes no difference. Just because he's smiling with you, you think that this is now your arrival. Did you know, beloved family, that corporate Britain has now taken over the carnival? That carnival no longer belongs to black people? See, and this is what we do. With everything that is ours, we allow someone else to take charge of it, to take it over. And this is what they've been trying to do. That's why I mentioned the march, the annual reparations march. That's why I mentioned the 10,000 man march. That's why I mentioned these things, because before you know it, they will so compromise us that it no longer becomes recognizable as the thing that it started out. People say to us, why are you lot Nation of Islam? Why can't white people join you? Why don't you let white people into your ranks? Because, beloved, what we have is unique to us. We have our own unique identity. And we reserve the right to be ourselves and not allow anyone to come in with an aim and an objective to water us down. Beloved, do you understand that most black people today who want to have a stall in carnival can't get a stall in carnival? Do you understand that the stalls are possibly now running into £1,000 a stall?
Yes, sir.
This has been taken over by corporate Britain. Do you understand that most of the catering now is done by these huge conglomerate, these companies? Do you understand that Carnival now turns over in excess of £100 million a year? This is big business now. But the people who it was started to benefit are not benefiting one iota. If anything, all that's happening is that it's just costing you an absolute fortune.
That's right. That's what's said.
The alcohol that they can buy cheaply now I think they can get alcohol in Lidl's and they can get alcohol in the supermarkets or whatever. That cheap alcohol, if it costs you £1 in Lidl, in the carnival it's going to cost you £5. They're just exploiting the people. This is the reality of what's going on now in Carnival, beloved. They're saying that this year they expect there to be 12,000 police. Again, over the years when I've been doing edutainment, we've referred to the Carnival as the annual police convention. It's an opportunity for police officers who haven't seen each other for a long time to meet up, beloved. On LBC, some of the devils were complaining that if we're going to have 12,000 coppers down at the carnival, then there's going to be all this crime in other parts of the country. Quite possible. But this is the amount. Imagine 12,000 police. What? See, do you understand that we are policed differently to our other people are policed? Do you understand that there is untold drug abuse and alcohol abuse that goes on at Glastonbury?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. 210,000 arrests, brother. 210,000
arrests. Glastonbury. They're saying that at the carnival they arrest 300 people or 400 people. What they never tell you is how many of those people are actually charged with anything in the end or convicted of anything. Because they arrest a lot of our people for nothing. You understand? They've got to justify their 12,000 expenditure because that runs into the millions. But we're policed differently to how other people are policed. With their festivals, there's always massive drug abuse, always massive alcohol abuse, always a lot of violence and disturbance and all manner of things. The police, the football matches and whatever back in the day, and a lot of that violence still goes on to this day. But you never hear about it in the way in which you hear about the carnival always been tarred with this idea of violence. And of course they're not talking about violence perpetrated by white people, and because the vast majority of people going to carnival now is not black people.
Teach, brother, teach.
But what they're trying to do is target the few groups of black people who go there to try to weed out and get rid of more black people from Carnival.
That's right. Yes, sir.
And then eventually when we go to Carnival, we just be going to Carnival as consumers. Where Carnival used to be a place that had a mass of sound systems. And the sound systems will be playing conscious music, reminding us of our cultural heritage, reminding us of our liberation struggle. Now, brother, children, no cry no more. You understand what I'm saying? For we wipe their weeping eyes. You understand what I'm saying? Rastaman chant and some strong, culturally powerful lyrics to deal with our reality. That ain't happening no more, beloved. Those sound systems can't get in there now. You can get in there now if you play some foolishness. And more, the sound systems and those who are allowed into Carnival are being handpicked by the corporate entities who are making all the money, taking all the money. The money is not going into the community. And by the way, Ladbroke Grove and these places, they're no longer the black enclaves that they used to be. Gentrification has wiped that place now to the degree where what they're literally talking about in the future, they've been trying to do this for years, talking about making the Carnival a ticketed event. Imagine, this is a demonstration over the murder of a black man and whose family never received justice. Now they want to turn it into a big money spinner for corporate Britain, for white Britain, and to mock black people who still foolishly, some of us still foolishly think it's got something to do with us and it's in our interest. It's not, beloved. It's not. According to some people, they go to Leeds Carnival now and they go to some other carnivals up north because those carnivals still have a kind of culturally black feel to them. They haven't been usurped and taken over by corporate Britain. And we applaud those brothers and sisters because within Carnival, it's not just about dancing and singing. And when we go down there today, we're not going there, beloved, to have nobody rub themselves up against us and for us to join in the revelry. We're going there as serious men to remind our people to be proud to be black. That's our mission. That's our mission. Praise be to Allah. And to try to send a message to our people that there's something more that we should be focused on here rather than just this revelry, this drunkenness, this intoxicated condition that the vast majority of us are going to find ourselves in at the end of this process. Beloved family, as I begin to close, they're making big money from the carnival. And it's been taken over completely. And the seriousness of it cannot be overestimated in that it's not just the carnival. Everything that we have as a people, because we don't take ownership of our own, and we allow other people to usurp what is ours, then we end up always with nothing. And then we wonder why other groups who come into the country in recent times end up having so much more than we do. Eastern Europeans with massive infrastructure of buildings and, economic power, because they develop shops and businesses which are about being Polish or about being Romanian or about being whatever their national origin is. That's what they're promoting. But we as a people, we're promoting integration. And what integration translates into is disintegration among ourselves. It don't make no sense, beloved. All praise is due to Allah. It's very sad. And we allow people to hoodwink us and to make us afraid to be ourselves. And we're going to the carnival today to say to our people, be black and be proud and be yourself. And come away from this madness which is not going to do us any good whatsoever. And we have to become a people who are about liberation all over again, because our liberation struggle has mostly been hijacked, because that's what carnival was in the beginning. It was part of our liberation process, but it's now been hijacked, stolen, taken away, and transformed into something which is unrecognizable. And the enemy is so sophisticated in his manipulation of populations and what do they call it? It's not just gentrification, but it's social engineering. Yes. That our people don't even notice what's going on. The majority. And then our youngsters who are young people, they just running into it, not realizing anything about the history of it. And so even you'll find today when some of our people see us down there, they'll be looking at us strange. Like, who are these people? We're dealing with our ancestors who died in terrible, terrible circumstances. And the people who covered up the murder and covered up and bringing to justice the perpetrators, these are the same people who are now in power, who are now steering us into this cul-de-sac called a big dance or a big celebration with no substance to it whatsoever. And carnival is going to become just like Christmas. It's the Christmas of summer. Because Brother Alvin wasn't completely wrong when he was talking about the pagan origins of Carnival. That's another story, but that's something that's also come down, because remember, it wasn't really a carnival at the start. It was people wearing placards, demanding justice, marching along the road, and so on and so forth in this country, beloved. But eventually it became Carnival. And even in that process, there was still an element of resistance and demonstration. But now, no, beloved. Now it's carnivorous. Carnival and carnivorous are related. Now it's cannibalism. Now it's a people feeding on themselves. Now it's sexual depravity. There was one video that I saw recently where one of the sisters in kind of carnival dress, big woman, on her all fours, on her hands and on her hands and on her legs, with her legs wide open, and a small child in between her legs gyrating. And this is in the public, and there's loads of people watching and cheering. This is how depraved we've become as a people, where we think that's entertainment, and we're cheering the child like, what? Look at that baby! Look how he's developed to the point where he's grinding himself on a big woman. The sisters now, some of them, they've lost all shame. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said that even the lower animals have got shame because they've got a tail to hide their most sensitive and private parts. But many of our sisters now, telling you, you're going to see some sights today, it leaves nothing whatsoever to the imagination. And they will spread out themselves in the public in such lewd and horrible ways that you see, beloved, you got to understand this, you know. The nation is not judged by the condition of the man. The nation is judged by the condition of the woman. And as a nation of people, we will get no respect whatsoever from the human family. I don't care how we think. Because, you know, we look at the Brazilian carnival. And that one is very naked as well. See, but again, you got to remember there's about 80 million of us in Brazil. That was where the largest amount of slaves from Africa were taken. And the same thing goes on there. And the same depravity goes on there. And this is no exception. But the way in which civilized people all around the world will look at us when they see the way we are allowing our women to be, we will not get any respect. They can't respect us because the woman in most civilized societies, if you want to mess with Chinese women, then you should expect to see a whole bunch of dead Chinese men, because they will be ready to die. You start messing with any national identity's woman, those people will not stand for it, beloved. Even the Caucasian man with his woman. One of the reasons he's so angry now is because he sees his woman with all these black men. A lot of us don't understand why black men are being shot down like it's going out of fashion in America by white police. But they resent the fact that black men can now take white women. And the same here. I see some of us, we look so proud walking down the road with our white girlfriend, and we really feel that we've arrived. But I'm telling you, man, and you want to say to the Nation of Islam, oh, yeah, you're racist because you don't like my relationship, you're racist. Shut up. You'll never get us coming and say nothing to you. Get on with what you want to do. Keep your white girlfriend, do whatever you want to do. I ain't talking about us. I'm telling you that when you're walking down the road with that white woman, there's untold white men driving past. And I'm telling you, man, they are biting their hands. And they are waiting for that day when they get that signal to take their woman back. Understand me, because I know you think you've arrived. I want to disabuse you of that idea. To the black women who are so happy with this Caucasian man. See, you always say to the black woman who's got the white man, ask that white man if he loves your black father. Ask him and watch his face turn red. Ask him if he really loves your black father. Ask him if he loves your black brother. Ask him if he really loves your black ancestors. You might see a little bit of tension there. You think he loves you? You're what's called exotic fruit. You're exotic.
Spoils of war. Booty.
Let me say, I'm closing now because I know I'm getting into trouble. But let me say, we don't fight against love.
No.
And a white man, it's possible, could fall in love with a black woman genuinely. And we think it's possible that vice versa, a Chinese man could fall in love with an Asian subcontinent woman and vice versa. These things are all possibilities, beloved. They're all possible within human relations. And we, in the Nation of Islam, will never stand in the way of anyone's true expression of love. We would be the biggest fools, and we would be on a hiding to nothing, because love is the most powerful force in the universe. We know this. What we're talking about ain't love. What we're talking about is infatuation. What we're talking about is lust. What we're talking about is a mythology about the black man being built in a particular way. A lot of white women, they can't wait to experience that, what they've heard. It's got nothing to do with love. A lot of black men have heard that the white girl is easy. She don't give you no hassle. That's something you heard. Got nothing to do with love. Got everything to do with experimentation. Playing. So, the statistics say that it could be as high as 70%, but most certainly over 50% of black men are with other women than black women. See that's now you're not talking about that random thing we was talking about earlier, where cross species kind of people falling in. No. Now you're talking about a sickness. We're the only people on the planet who do this.
Think about it.
That's a sickness. That's called self-hatred. That's called indoctrination to the degree where you think that to make progress in life, you have to be with other than yourself. My God. They say, the statistics say that the black woman is fast catching up with the black man. That she is now over 35% with other than her own self. And it's becoming more and more difficult to find the black couple. In the carnival, another term that we came up with was spot the black at the carnival. Because the carnival now is, you're literally looking for black people. Where are the black people there? Because it's so infiltrated, and not just infiltrated, taken over. It's no longer something that we can claim ownership of. And that assault, as I said, began in a very relentless way back in 76. In 77, it was a whole different ball game. That's when they started bringing in now these kind of restrictions, barriers, and you have to go one way and all of this kind. You can't turn back and all this kind. It's like they're herding cattle, and it's very dangerous because the slightest little thing happens down there, people start stampeding and running, and then you got potential disaster on your hands where people get crushed. And so, in closing, beloved, I just want to encourage us to understand that we used to have Choice FM.
Yes.
Come on, boys. Come on. Choice.
Exactly. We used to have a choice. It's no longer ours, beloved. Everything. Capital extra. All of these. See, everything is being built on us. And everything uses us and uses our music and uses our talent and our skills and our genius, but it doesn't belong to us. People like Tim Westwood have become mega rich, and see these people like Westwood and these people, they dress down and they look all trampish, and they try and make out that they're down with the people, like they're just like the people. Let me tell you something. Westwood is rich, stinking rich. Richer than all of those black people he rubs around with. David Rodigan used reggae music. Yeah, he may well love it. And you see, it's important to understand that a lot of them do love our culture, beloved. They do love what passes for black culture, and they do consume it and use it, and it does benefit them, and they do get energy and vibration from it, and it does elevate them. But at the end of the day, it's still a form of cultural appropriation, and it's still a form of exploitation, and it's still a form of riding in on our backs, where they benefit and they're elevated and they transcend their own realities, while the masses of our people remain the same. There is no evolution for the masses of our people. There is no benefit to the masses of our people, except our people looking at Westwood with his trousers down and thinking, well, if that white man can do it and talk the filth and the crap that he talks on his radio show, then why shouldn't I do it? Because evidently that's what's made him successful. No, that ain't what's made him successful. And so, beloved family, Carnival, like so many of our things, has been taken. And we had newspapers that have now disappeared. New Nation disappeared. The Voice is still there, but sometimes when I look at it, it's so tabloidy. It's like we just take whatever the tabloids are talking about, we talk about, and you know. But it's so wishy-washy and so weak. It doesn't seem to be. There doesn't seem to be anything uniquely black or driven about that paper. You know, BET, all of these things, and you know, with black things, they're so powerful that the powers that be, when they move in to take it, they know what they're doing. And it's like we don't know. I mean, I was having an argument with somebody about Beats, the headphones that was created by Dre. And you know, they were really saying, yeah, that was a proper move by Dre. I'm saying, well, come on, man. Dre could have kept Beats and he could have made them just as big and maybe a slower pace to get there, but at least it would belong to a black man and belong to black people. That's the point. But we sell out. We sell it. And then Sony or whoever takes it over, and then they make... Come on, man. It's so sad, but because we're in a mentality of me, myself, and I. And as long as I'm rich, and as long as I've got the money for myself and my little family or whatever, but then when the powers that be attack them, because remember, Weinstein and Epstein and the boys, they continue in perpetuity, irrespective of what they're accused of and what they are proven to be a part of. And they don't really ever seem to suffer with 18 months in a private wing of a prison where you only have to spend the evenings in. I mean, have you ever heard anything so absurd that you can call justice? But when it comes to a Bill Cosby, who is an iconic figure in the black community, who is a father figure, the Huxtables was one of the few programs that ever came on that kind of showed a kind of cohesive, upright, upstanding, professional, respected black family. And you got to understand, beloved, that the subconscious mind cannot distinguish between fantasy and reality. And so when you hear of a Bill Cosby now being sent to prison for historical crimes of where somebody is saying you did something, you say no, I didn't, and on the basis of that, a man like that is brought down and destroyed. Come on, beloved. In the minds of the masses of the people who are observing that, observing the Cosbys, observing him, then the whole thing, all of the legacy of the Cosbys is destroyed, everything is destroyed, and the last memory is of Bill Cosby, the pervert or the rapist or something of that nature. At the time when Mike Tyson was on trial for rape, one of the Kennedys was on trial for rape. And the evidence against the Kennedy was deep. And Kennedy was acquitted, Tyson was convicted.
Imagine.
Now they've got R. Kelly. They went after Michael Jackson three times while he was alive, and they couldn't get him, and it was proven that he was not guilty, but on the man's death, what do they call it? Leaving Neverland. Demons. And then they roped in Oprah Winfrey to be one of the principal attackers of the character assassination of Michael Jackson. Look, beloved, you got to understand that white supremacy is on its deathbed, but it's fighting back. White supremacy is not going to go out without a fight. And all of these takeover jobs and all of these whitewashes that you see taking place all the time, it's all by design to try to keep white supremacy in perpetuity, to keep white supremacy propped up, to keep white supremacy alive. But white supremacy is dying. And we've got to withdraw from white supremacy any support that we're giving to white supremacy. And that's why, beloved, for the rest of this year and the beginning of 2020, we're calling on black people to start to recognize what we call Blacksit. Where we're saying to our people, come out of her, my people. Be not be partakers of her sins and her plagues. Come out. Blacksit. We are calling for separation from a system which is a bloodsucker on our very lives. And we want to be independent. We want autonomy. We want, as a people, to have the damage that has been done to us historically and continues to this day. We want that damage to be repaired. And we're quite happy and prepared to begin to repair ourselves. But we need white people to get the hell out of our way. Stop interfering with our desire to be an upright, upstanding, righteous people who can do something for ourselves. Blacksit, beloved. Blacksit. Separation. Thank you for listening. May Allah bless you as I greet you in peace. Assalamu alaikum.